Well, it looks like the ball has finally begun rolling again. Vermintide fans, rejoice! There is actual content on the way. I know, it's a foreign feeling at this point. The wait has been long and frustrating, and there's no guarantee that what's on the other side will make up for all that lost time, but a new DLC is on the way for Ratman Murder Simulator Volume 2. Courtesy of, well, it's Warhammer, so you know it got leaked. The August 3rd edition of White Dwarf magazine has announced Shadows Over Bogenhafen will be coming to Vermintide 2. There is no official confirmation from Fat Shark at the time of this video's rendering, but their announcement will be forthcoming very soon, I'm sure. Now, the developers over in Sweden must have played a bunch of pen and paper RPGs growing up, because yet again, this DLC is straight from the Enemy Within campaign, the first edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, dating all the way back to 1987. That right there, my friends, is old school. And if you remember, the final Vermintide 1 map pack was Death on the Reich, also from that same Enemy Within campaign. And combined with some good old-fashioned data mining, our knowledge of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and the fact that we're literate, or at least I'd like to think I am, we actually have a decent idea of what we can expect. Straight from White Dwarf magazine, the text reads, "In this expansion, you get to journey to Bogenhafen, where a terrible plague has overcome the inhabitants. You and your fellow adventurers must find out what's happening and get to the source of the evil. Hint, it might have something to do with Nurgle." And thanks to Mike Spam Channel 1 on YouTube, the intros to each of these two maps have already been data mined and are here to tickle your eardrums. Have a listen.
I'm hearing rumours of something nasty creeping through Bogenhafen. It starts out as plague and gets worse from there. Demon plants and tentacles, if that sounds familiar. If it doesn't, you ain't been paying attention, have you? My contacts reckon it started in the Pit, the town's poorest district, so do me a solid and get it stopped, would you? I'm not gonna lie, Bogenhafen has a poor reputation, what with one thing and another, but lately, things have been getting worse. Plague, sickness and disappearances, the usual trademarks of our packed sworn friends. So, what say you get your lazy arses upriver and see what's what? Take your best gear. I reckon this'll be a sticky one. I've some answers, and none of them good. Our Bogenhafen problem's down to a Chaos rune sword. Draws fatty Nurgle's eye wherever it goes, and plague follows. Plague and worse. One Father Krausman has it locked up in his secret sanctum Maleficarum waiting for you. Don't disappoint him. Or me. Sooner we get the Blight Reaper out of Bogenhafen, the better. Turns out our Bogenhafen problem's down to a Chaos rune sword, the Blight Reaper. The good news is that Father Krausman has it under lock and key in a hidden sanctum Maleficarum, but that'll not last. Bring it back here. I doubt we can destroy the bloody thing, but I'm prepared to give it a good old Hockland try, as me mother used to say.
So essentially we're dealing with a Nurgle infection in Bogenhafen, courtesy of the Blight Reaper, a Chaos rune sword of immense power, and it's starting to sound a bit like Castle Drakenfels, and that a single devastating artifact will be the source of the calamity. I think it's pretty likely we'll be facing off against a champion of Nurgle, wielding this weapon come the finale of the second map, and if we're really lucky, we might even get our first glimpse of a demon, although I'm not gonna hold my breath on that front. I do think demonic enemies are virtually guaranteed to happen at some point. I'm just not sure that this will be the time Fat Shark chooses to finally deliver Nurgle's truly blessed into our waiting arms. But let's set the stage here real quick. Bogenhafen is a trading center southwest of Altdorf, a prosperous market district with easy access to rivers that flow from Marienburg, Nuln, and the capital of the Reikland itself. Sitting at such a confluence of wealth, it's not really a surprise the town itself grew quite rich, quite fast, and the Merchants Guild that sprung up at its center quickly took control of its governance. The von Saparnatheim family, and one of the punniest names Games Workshop has ever come up with, are technically the rulers of Bogenhafen, but in practice they leave administration to the Merchants Guild as long as they receive their share of tax revenue. But as the end times come to Reikland, and the ruling families begin to fall to the perditions of chaos, cults begin turning up and gnawing at the foundations of all that had already been built. And that is where we find ourselves now, getting very close to the time the brothers Glott march on Marienburg and bring a cataclysmic siege to Altdorf itself. So lots of Nurgle things happening in Reikland, and this will be a great snapshot of an incredibly important part of the timeline in Warhammer history. Some of the most important cities on the planet begin to fall in the heart of the Empire, and a time when Emperor Karl Franz and his armies are thrown completely on the back foot after a disastrous defeat at Heffingen to the armies of Nurgle. So what I'm hoping for here is a gloomier, darker, and rainier rendition of map design for this DLC. Toxic Rain literally covers the entirety of Reikland, sprouting unnatural growths and mutating plants and animals as the hordes of Nurgle advance, and the cloud cover gets so thick in this period of history that much of the province is plunged into eternal night. One of the things I loved about Vermintide 1 was the atmosphere, and while V2 certainly doesn't lack for that, I think there are one too many bright and shiny maps in the rotation. And for some reason, I feel more at home, and certainly more immersed, amidst the gothic architecture and moonlit claustrophobic streets of an Empire city. Nighttime and heavy rain is just a great way to get people into the setting, and it's a big reason why Screaming Bell is one of my favorite maps. Now, quite often when Fat Shark releases a new DLC, there will be some new gameplay element, a twist that changes things up and makes the maps feel different from what's come before. For Drakenfels, it was the idea of deadly traps and a darkness mechanic that made seeing more than a few feet in front of you nearly impossible. For Death on the Reich, it was a naval battle as Vermarines attempted to board and gut you on the open river, and for Stromdorf, it was our first real boss fight, as Krench, warlord of Clan Fester, rose up and started smacking people around with a warpstone-powered halberd. Pretty awesome boss fight, and I would love to see something like that come again soon. Now, with so little information to go off, it's hard to know what exactly will change the game here, but I'm feeling fairly confident we'll see a new Chaos-themed boss, because an inanimate sword just sitting in a room with magical wards doesn't make for an incredibly interesting story or varied gameplay. And this would be a perfect opportunity to start moving away from the generic Chaos Lord model that Gatekeeper Naglfar and Bodvar Ribspreader share, and maybe get into something a bit more horrendous and a bit more terrifying. A Herald or Demon of Nurgle would be quite the sight to behold, and certainly be a nice welcome back cherry on top. A very pestilent, very green, very disgusting cherry. But weapons are always an important component of content like this as well. The Glaive and Volley Crossbow came with Castle Drakenfels, the Pickaxe and Falchion came with Carrick Asgaraz, and the Flaming Dagger came with Death on the Reich. So I'm curious what you guys think about weaponry, which specific weapons of murder you would like to play with, and what you would like to see get added. I think Sienna is the character that most can be done with, simply because her flames are malleable and can be turned loose into pretty much any shape, and I wouldn't mind seeing Unchained with a Balrog like whip or something real creative and outside the box, but for the rest of the characters, it's definitely starting to get harder to add weapons that are fun and actually unique. There are grenade launchers, long rifles, trollhammer torpedoes, but adding melee weapons seems a bit more challenging, so I'm curious what you guys can come up with, because either way, 2 new toys does seem to be the standard, and I'm not sure I could come up with 2 actually interesting and unique melee weapons that would really completely change the game. There's stuff like two-handed flails and kind of different variations of weapons that already exist in game, but something entirely new, something entirely different, and something else entirely, and I'm not sure Fat Shark is going to have a very easy time coming up with stuff like that. So I want to know what you guys think. On top of all of that, this patch needs to nail the bug fixing and balance elements that people have been clamoring for. This will be the first and best chance to revitalize the game after a long absence of regular patching. Weapon balance isn't completely atrocious right now, but it's definitely not good, and there are quite a few that are memes on Legend rather than being actually truly viable weapons. Flamestorm is kind of a joke, Halberd is clearly overperforming, and shield weapons are complete trash. There's simply too much armor on Legend difficulty for weapons with minimal armor piercing to ever get picked, and while you certainly don't want to make every weapon good at every single thing, there is a balance to be struck there, and it's not in a great place right now. This would also be a fantastic time for quests and contracts to return in its full glory, because it gives you a targeted way to get specific loot and cosmetics you want when they appear on the board, and it gives you a reason to boot up the game every single day to check what's available. It worked amazing for Vermintide 1, I see no valid reason why it should not return for Vermintide 2. And Red Dust has to be a thing. It just has to. It is obscene how many garbage trinkets you'll drop, how many useless duplicate weapons you'll drop, without ever getting stuff you actually want. And as someone who regularly completes Legend deeds with full Grims and full Tomes, you should not be getting 4th and 5th duplicates that are completely unusable after the most challenging runs in the game. That is a horrible way to incentivize people to keep playing. Now, I happen to be someone who likes just the replayability of getting better and playing and challenging myself, but there should still be good rewards that are tied to very challenging deeds, and right now, they're not. It's kind of random, and that's not a very satisfying way to reward players for doing well. So yeah, all these things and more are elements of the game that need tweaking or outright changing when this patch goes live, and although there's no way Fat Shark is going to get to all of it in one go, it really needs to be one hell of a patch, or I fear some people are just going to bounce for good. I'm not one of them. I'm quite happy with the game and I have a blast every time I play, but I can understand people's frustrations and certainly share some of them, and they have been mounting for a while. In terms of a release date for Shadows Over Bogenhafen, I think it's a fairly safe assumption that late August or early September is what we're looking at here. I believe their employees are getting back into the office after vacation about now, and they're nearing completion as we speak and moving into the testing phase of this all, so I wouldn't be surprised if it goes into beta as early as next week. Hopefully, we will get an official announcement very soon. I want to know what you all want to see from Shadows Over Bogenhafen in the meantime. I will see you all next time. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.